When Mustang premiered at Cannes Film Festival in 2015, many viewers and critics likened the film to The Virgin Suicides, which wasn't surprising. Both pictures are the female director's first features that intended to showcase the pain and beauty of girlhood. Both movies center around 5 sisters at different stages of adolescence, ages 12 to 17, who are isolated from the outside world by their strict family members. And in both films, the girls resort to desperate measures to regain control over their lives, resulting in many tragedies. When asked about her film's resemblance to The Virgin Suicides, Deniz Gamze Ergüven, a Turkish-French female director, said in one of the interviews, quote, "Yes, they're similar, but I was not inspired by it. I read the book and I watched the film, but Mustang is my story. My family, just like in Virgin Suicides, is a women's family. Especially when I look at the photos of my mother's generation. I see girls in long hair. If I was to describe them romantically, they're like a girl's nebula. I also have one interesting story from my childhood. One summer, we were at our family house, and other relative girls arrived as well. Blondes, brunettes, we were all together like in a coupe. A neighbor boy has asked our friend the phone number of the house, and our friend asked, for which one? And he responded, doesn't matter, just any one of them. I still remember this memory, this approach of not being able to differentiate between the girls. This perception of what difference does it make, it's just a girl. This memory I have is very common point with Virgin Suicides." End quote. This exact point is also mentioned in Mustang. There are many parallels between these two movies since they deal with the same topics, the sexualization and sexual repression of teenage girls. And that's what I'll be talking about in this video, the similarities and differences between these two movies. I don't think many people know about Mustang, so if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to check it out. As I've already mentioned, both movies focus on 5 sisters, with the youngest being in the epicenter. In Virgin Suicides, Cecilia Lisbon is 13 in the 1970s Michigan, and she sets the whole story in motion when she suddenly decides to end her own life. She fails the first time but succeeds on her second try. The family life was already not ideal and borderline abusive since the girls' parents, especially their mother, have their own moral code and are extremely strict. After Cecilia's death, the situation worsens and the whole family isolates themselves in the house, leaving the girls no choice but to follow in their little sister's footsteps. In the original book written by Jeffrey Eugenides, Cecilia is described as the weird sister due to her specific interests and withdrawn nature. Cecilia doesn't have any real friends. She likes wearing a 1920s vintage wedding dress, dyeing her underwear black, and writing in her diary that she started about a year and a half before she died. In there, she writes about her and her sister's day-to-day life and other topics which seem important to her. For example, the endangered animals, the elm trees that are dying of Dutch elm disease in her neighborhood, the military-industrial complex, and the Illuminati. In her room, you will find incense, tarot cards, and crystals. This is the age when you naturally seek a lot of information. You start developing your own interests, opinions, and identity, and you start making sense of the world and its dangers and injustices. This is usually the time when your innocent rose-tinted glasses shatter for the first time. First failed friendship, one-sided crushes, family problems, abuse, and illness. You realize your parents are not perfect. People disappoint, nothing is forever, and everybody is going to die. Your world is so small because it's just school, home, repeat, that any arising issue feels like life and death. The hormones and the body changes are the worst. Not to play the suffering Olympics, puberty is bad for everybody, but generally, I think girls have it worse. The changes boys go through are you get taller, your voice deepens, you develop acne, you grow hair in new places, and you might get accidental wood at the wrong times. Some might experience physical discomfort and pain during this process, but girls, as Belinda famously said in Fleabag, are born with pain built in.
We carry it within ourselves throughout our lives. Men don't.
Not to sound pretentious, but it's truly dreadful to realize that your major life-altering experiences are going to be accompanied by unknown amounts of pain and blood. Getting your period, first sexual experience, pregnancy and labor. I wonder what menopause brings. I don't think people talk about it much. Some of it you can definitely prevent and manage, but it's nature. The idea of having breasts might be appealing to some at first, but then as you start going through excruciating pain and inappropriate comments as they develop, You don't want to deal with them. Your childhood ends as soon as the first creepy man hits on you. Girls can't be girls. They are women in the making. As soon as you get your first period, people tell you, wow, you're a woman now. This is the real deal. A girl can start her period as early as 8. So imagine an 8-year-old woman. Having body hair is shameful. No one really tells you that it's normal to have hair on your face and arms and stomachs and backs. But if you're a girl, it's considered disgusting. Nothing destroys the little self-confidence you have built faster than somebody pointing out that you have a female mustache out of the blue one day while you're at school. It's just peach fuzz. And while we're on the topic of school, having your period every month and sitting there during classes sweating in your blood-filled diaper, aka pad, is horrible. And let's not forget the fear of leaking. There are of course tampons and menstrual cups. They can fix this discomfort, but you still have to use a school restroom, which is an experience in itself. Plus, not everybody can use these products when they're first starting out. I also can't forget the fact that girls have way more to lose when they engage in a sexual activity. They're the ones who bear the risk of getting pregnant. This is basically why Cecilia ended her life. She got her first period. I'm kidding, of course. There is more to the story, but it makes sense that if you are already pretty sensitive and more empathetic, the life is going to be harder for you. The rest of Lisbon's sisters managed to survive being 13, but not Cecilia. She looks like a gentle old soul, especially when you see her in that wedding dress. You get a glimpse of her character during the party that is thrown after her first suicide attempt. The parents do it on the advice of a psychologist, and they invite many boys from the neighborhood, including a boy named Joe who has Down syndrome. Cecilia can't bear watching Joe being treated like a circus animal who is only capable of tricks. Her sisters find him amusing, but Cecilia probably feels sorry for him, and the whole situation just makes her feel like life sucks, so she asks to be excused. This is when she commits her second attempt and finally passes away. Cecilia's autonomy and identity doesn't get recognized by her own mother even in death. She doesn't get buried in her favorite vintage wedding gown, but in a dress she hated, a Christmas gift from her grandmother. Of course, since the story of the virgin's is narrated by a collective anonymous voice, a group of neighborhood boys turned lonely, obsessed men in their 40s who are unable to let go of the mystery surrounding the deaths of the Lisbon sisters. You can only rely on their perception of the girls, the stories they've heard about them, and other people's second-hand accounts. According to the boys, even Cecilia's own sisters acknowledged that she was strange. After Cecilia's death, Therese told one of the boys, "Cecilia was weird, but we're not." From the boys' point of view, Cecilia's voice sounded mature and tired, like she possessed wisdom beyond anyone's comprehension, like she was acquainted with true suffering and death. And after her passing, like a contagious disease, this aura attached itself to the other sisters, who are Lux, she's 14 years old, Bonnie, she's 15, Mary, who is 16, and Therese, who is 17. Lux is the mischievous type who likes smoking, listening to rock music, suntanning on the front lawn, wearing tube tops and makeup, and flirting with boys. She seems to be the only sister who is sexually active, but her promiscuity might just be a way of getting love, which she and her sisters immensely lack at home. It might also be her way of rebelling against her mother's strict religious beliefs. According to some boys' accounts, Lux would sometimes treat hookups as a chore, and it seemed like she didn't really like the act that much. I don't think it's accidental that Lux is the most popular girl among her sisters. She's the only one who accorded with the boys' image of the Lisbon girls, and that image is a fun, casual, and sexually available girl. Why isn't it surprising? I think Lux morphs herself into the boys' ideal because she wants to be noticed, and this is the only way. As soon as she tries to show how she truly feels inside, when she gets emotional and serious, guys can't handle it. The hookup with Trip Fontaine after the homecoming is a great example of that. Quote, Lux said in the middle, "I always screw things up, I always do," and began to sob. The boys asked Trip what happened next. "I just took off. It's weird. I mean, I liked her. I really liked her. I just got sick of her right then." End quote. Bonnie is the middle sister, and she doesn't get much attention in the novel, which is kind of true to the experience of many middle children who tend to feel left out. Bonnie is described as a goody-goody and skittish. She believes in God and likes to carry a rosary with her. At first, it seems like she's not that interested in boys, but when the girls go to homecoming, Bonnie lets her date kiss her twice, even though the first one was pure peer pressure from Lux and her date Trip. Bonnie even asks the guy if he'll call her, so it looks like secret secretly Bonnie wants to be a normal teenage girl. The guy doesn't call her back, so she gets her teen girl experience, I guess. Mary is a great hostess and seems pretty reserved.
Tim, would you like some punch? Do you want some more pop?
Mary really likes makeup. She hides it in the sock under the sink from her mother. She appears to care about her looks a lot. She can spend hours looking at herself in the mirror. She's very self-conscious about her teeth. All Lisbon sisters have crowded teeth, but Mary is the only one who tried doing something about it. She went to an orthodontist without telling her parents, but was told that the clinic needed a parental consent. A nurse heard Mary crying. Allegedly, Mary also wanted to be a cheerleader, but her mother didn't let her. Mary actually becomes the only one who survives after the sisters decide to end their lives a year after Cecilia's death. She later succeeds the second time. Therese is the oldest sister, and she's not interested in the typical girly things. She's nerdy and smart. From 15 years old, she started helping her dad with yard work. She grows seahorses in a drinking glass in her bedroom and has a stuffed iguana with plastic organs that she uses to teach biology. Therese also has a ham radio, which, according to the boys' opinion, she uses to mentally escape the prison that is her house. After the homecoming dance, Therese allows her date to kiss her on the cheek. Lisbon sisters' personalities are recognized even in the ways they decide to take their own lives. Cecilia picks the most violent and bloody ways, like she wants to wear her pain on the outside for everyone to see. Lux passes away in the car in the driver's seat, as an indication of her free-spirited nature. Bonnie uses a rope and does it in the basement where Cecilia's party was held. The room was left untouched. The boys said Bonnie looked clean and festive like a piñata. In the end, she wanted to bring all the attention to herself. She wanted to be celebrated. Mary, with her hostess qualities and motherly nature, chooses the kitchen. Maybe she hated performing these assigned roles. And Therese picks the most practical method in her opinion: pills. I'm sure she knew which ones to take and how much. What differentiates Mustang from the first movie is that for the most part, it's narrated by the youngest sister Lale, who's 12 and a half. So the movie utilizes the voiceover as well, but in a more limited way. The story is set in rural Turkey, somewhere in the 2010s. One day after school, 5 orphaned sisters decide to go to the beach, where they end up innocently playing a game of chicken fight with their male classmates. Since the girls live in a conservative community, this event becomes a big scandal, which costs the sisters their freedom. Their grandmother and uncle withdraw them from school and lock them up inside the house in preparation for arranged marriages. So you have Lale, who's 12 and a half, Nur, who is 14, Ece, who is 15, Selma, who is 16, and Sonay, who is 17. Since you're looking at the girls through Lale's eyes, they seem much closer to you than the Lisbon sisters. You know that what's happening to them is true and not some gossip, but honestly, in terms of personalities, they're almost the same as the Lisbon girls. There's still distance between you and the characters. Lale is the youngest, so she can't know what is going on inside her sisters' heads, so it makes sense. But Mustang sisters don't have distinct interests like the Lisbon girls. Their characters shine only when you see how they react and deal with the inevitable circumstances. Until then, you view them as a single entity.
5 girls were one body with 5 heads, 10 arms, 10 legs. It was this little monster of femininity who loses one piece after another during the film, assesses wounds, recomposes and strikes back.
Interestingly enough, Jeffrey Eugenides has also compared his characters to a hydra. You can find various lines about it in the novel. He believes that in order to capture the real essence of his story in a movie form, the girls should be played by different actresses depending on who is talking about them. Quote, "That would be closer to the spirit of how I wrote the book. I tried to think of the girls as a shape-shifting entity with many different heads, like a hydra, but not monstrous. A nice hydra." End quote. Initially, he also wanted the girls to die in succession, but it would have made the story too repetitive, so he didn't do it. Compared to Cecilia, Lale is feisty and full of life. If in the first movie the elder sisters follow the fate of the youngest one, in Mustang the elder sister's suffering encourages the youngest one to take control of her own destiny. Lale is a normal, innocent girl who is just entering her teen years, so all she wants is to have fun, play games, watch football, and enjoy her childhood. Through Lale, the movie captures this precise moment when you lose your innocence and become aware of boys, intimacy, and your own body, and the abuse you and your sisters are experiencing. Lale is not afraid to confront the neighbor who allegedly spread gossip about them playing with the boys. or spit in the drinks of potential in-laws when they come for her sister's matchmaking.
Git onlar de ki kahve mi istiyorsunuz? Gidin kendiniz yapın.
She concocts a whole escape plan by the end of the story and manages to save her sister Noor, who is the last to marry. Sonay, who is the oldest, is similar to Lux. Both of their actions lead to the imprisonment of the rest. Lux breaks the homecoming curfew rule by coming home the next morning, and Sonay is the one who proposes going to the beach after school. She is uninhibited and coy. She likes sunbathing as well. She's the only sister who has a real boyfriend. What differentiates Sonay from Lux is the way she views intimate relations. It's not a tool to get something or a rebellious reaction. It's a natural thing she does with her boyfriend out of love, even though they don't do it in a traditional way because Sonay is supposed to stay pure until she's married.
İşte arkadan.
Arkadan.
Deniz Gamze Ergüven in one interview explained that Sonay was 7 when the girls lost their parents in a car crash, so she spent the majority of her childhood in the city with a completely different set of values, which might explain why she's so open-minded. Since she is the eldest, Sonay is married off first. However, she doesn't give in so easily by insisting that she will only marry her boyfriend, not a stranger.
Tamam.
Thus, the next sister in line is put in danger. Selma is the replacement for Sonay, and her protection is apathy. At first, she looks like she accepts the situation, but her true feelings come to the surface later. Since she is inexperienced, she feels anxious about the first night. When the wedding day finally comes, Selma gets drunk, retreats to a quieter place, and cries. Lale can't understand why Selma is so passive. Why can't she just take the uncle's car and drive? But Selma can't drive, and she doesn't know where to go. This is when Lale's naivety cracks for the first time, and the desire in her to learn how to drive is ignited. During her first wedding night, Selma doesn't bleed, which alarms the groom and his family, so they take Selma to a doctor the same day while she's still wearing her wedding dress, like they're returning a faulty product back. Selma is so tired of people not believing her that she tells the doctor,
Dünyadaki herkesle yattım.
because what difference does it make, virgin or whore? There are two sides of the same coin, because both of these labels reduce women's value to sex, and if they can or cannot provide it. Selma's body is not hers anymore, it's public. This is what it feels like when you are reduced to an object for others' pleasure. This line sticks with you the same way Cecilia's line does.
Obviously, doctor, you've never been a 13-year-old girl.
The male doctor actually promises not to tell the groom's family about this, but when he examines Selma, he confirms that she's lying.
Emin misin?
Neden emin miyim?
Dünyadaki herkesle yattığından.
A physical exam like this is not an accurate or reliable test of sexual activity. For the most part, it's very hard to tell unless your hymen is very thick and covers most of the opening. It rarely covers all of it. It's also natural for hymen to wear away even before you engage in sexual activity. Despite the doctor being kind, this scene illustrates how harmful beliefs about women can penetrate all spheres of society, from politics to medicine. After the girls get married, they're supposed to live with their husband's family. So you don't see Sonay and Selma until something horrible happens to Ece, the middle sister. In her reaction, Ece is like Selma. She takes her marriage news with stoic resignation because she has already made up her mind about this world, similar to Cecilia. And like a fellow middle child Bonnie, Ece was always unnoticeable. And this might be the reason why the uncle thought Ece would be an easy target for his sexual abuse. Lale sees him going into Ece's room at night, so we as audience learn it with her. According to the director, the uncle never did it to Sonay and Selma, so from this point, Ece's behavior starts to make even more sense. She starts obsessively eating the biscuits her future in-laws have brought, staring into space, and engaging in casual intimacy like Lux. Mustang has the exact same scene you can find in the Virgin novel, when Lux hooks up with a random boy in the station wagon while her mother stands in line at the bank. One day, during a family lunch, Ece starts making jokes at the table to get some laughs from her sisters and to piss her uncle off. What provokes her is the message she hears on TV the uncle is forcing everybody to watch and listen about the way women should behave. Women should be chaste and pure, and they mustn't laugh loudly in public. The uncle punishes Ece by sending her to her room where she takes her own life by using the uncle's gun. After Ece's passing, the uncle switches his attention to Nur. He begins abusing her immediately, and it's quickly decided that Nur should also be married off, even though she's only 14. Since Nur and Lale are the closest in age, they're pretty alike. They enjoy playing together, and Nur shows off the same fiery character at the beginning when the girls get accused of indecency with the boys. Luckily, Lale has been planning the escape and learning how to drive thanks to a young truck driver she befriended. With his help and Lale's plan, the sisters escape to Istanbul, where they find Lale's female teacher. She gave Lale her address before moving, and that's how the story of Mustang Sisters ends. Despite these movies being set in different countries and cultures, they both present the same picture of how young girls are viewed and treated in many societies. Even though the story of Mustang was initially born out of desire to tell what it's like being a woman in Turkey specifically, the director was surprised how deeply it resonated with so many women from all over the world. As she said, cinema has no borders. Both families are pretty much the same. They are extremely conservative and religious. The woman stays home, the man works, and they care deeply about how they are perceived in their communities. But what's interesting is that they weren't always like that. The girls in both stories had more freedom in the past before their early adolescence. In the novel, the collective male narrator notes that the Lisbon family looked happier in their old photographs. In the old days, they would travel more, and Mr. Lisbon would bring the girls to baseball games. But then the family togetherness suddenly drops off as soon as the eldest sister reaches the age of 12. The Mustang sisters, as I've already briefly mentioned, lost their parents in a car accident. The eldest was 7 and the youngest was only 3. The director revealed that the girls used to live in a city, that their mother didn't have an arranged marriage, so the family was more open-minded than their relatives. After the death of their parents, the girls went to live with their father's family, their grandmother and uncle, in a rural village. Deniz Gamze Ergüven stated, quote, "When you have children or a family touched by such tragedy, they have a status of exception within the community. It was clear to me that the girls would have played outside after dark after the other kids, and they had been set wild and free more than normal, because they're not normal. Plus, they're foreigners to the village." End quote. As soon as the girls reach their early teens, their every move is viewed through a sexual lens, and for some reason it becomes their fault, and this is when the supervision starts. The girls can't wear makeup or the clothes they want to wear, they can't watch certain programs on TV or listen to rock music or use a computer. They can't date and naturally explore their sexuality on their own terms, and in extreme cases, like in these two movies, the girls don't even deserve an education. Quote, "There is a filter of sexualization through which women are perceived. It's an idea that the main religions carry, a way of saying that women create disorder because they generate desire. The director, Catherine Breillat, has a thought that I really like. If we proceed with the same logic, we should cover up kids from head to toe because they're pedophiles. If we start to organize societies to accommodate people who can't handle their desire, then it's going wrong."
C'est plutôt de faire des choses pour le regard émoustillé des hommes. C'est pas d'aller dans des vérités de jeunes filles pleines de désarroi avec le changement du corps, qui chez les filles est bien plus rapide que chez les garçons, les prennent des fois de plein fouet alors qu'elles sont encore des enfants.
In Mustang, in the background, you oftentimes hear speeches from different politicians expressing their sexist beliefs. According to the director, the uncle is a collective of all these people who are on a mission to promote purity and chastity. Quote, "He's like the conservatives in our country who continually talk about what women and men should do. They're always micromanaging things and talking about, like a school director saying things like, girls and boys shouldn't take the same staircases when they go to class, thinking that there is something so sexual happening at 8 o'clock in the morning when you go to math. Most of us aren't even half awake." End quote. Mustang doesn't waste time to make this point. An innocent game of chicken fight becomes a breaking point for the conservative relatives. In their eyes, the girls were pleasuring themselves on the shoulders of the boys.
The incident that triggered the little event in the village was something we lived with the girls of my family.
Not only are the girls physically beaten in order of their age for this, but they are also taken to a doctor for a virginity check. As Lale says in the voiceover, the house turns into a wife factory. The girls stop going to school and start learning how to cook and sew and take care of the house, which are good life skills to have. Lale actually uses them to escape. But the difference is that the girls don't have any other choice. The only path is to become someone else's wife. The grandmother also makes shapeless shit-colored dresses, aka uniform for the girls to wear every day. I'm surprised Mrs. Lisbon has never checked her daughter's private parts. She also believes in keeping romance under surveillance by arranging group dates for the girls, which she of course also chaperones. No man is allowed inside the house, not even the gardener who asks for a glass of water. The Lisbon girls also know how to perform quote-unquote female duties. In the novel, it might be more apparent. They clean and help their mother in the kitchen. Lux, for example, knows how to knit. Mrs. Lisbon can't accept the fact that her ways of parenting led to Cecilia's suicide attempt. And after a pathetic cover-up party to bring Cecilia out of her depression fails, the party which Mrs. Lisbon was totally against from the very beginning, she believes that the outside world is to blame. But the major event that completely solidifies the Lisbon and Mustang girls' imprisonment is the ball dance, the last taste of ultimate joy and pleasure before everything is taken away. In the first movie, it's the homecoming dance, and in Mustang, it's the football match. Deniz Gamze Ergüven viewed her story as a fairy tale full of orphans and evil stepparents, which I think can also be applied to the Lisbon girls who are romanticized by the collective male narrator. Quote, "When the actress who plays Sanai came into casting with her hair long to her legs, it was like she's out of a fairy tale. So that led to the image of the girls in their house with their long hair like so many fairy tale figures that you would have. And the biscuits they're served, which are like poison biscuits. The football game is like the ball the girls would dream of going to." End quote. The uncle doesn't allow Lale, who loves football, to attend a match because of the man in the audience. In Turkey, at the time, between 2011 and 2014, the Turkish Football Federation banned male supporters from attending some matches due to hooliganism. Some games were played in completely empty stadiums, but eventually the rules were changed and only women, girls, and boys under 12 were allowed to attend. Lale learns that other women and girls in the village are going to be taken by bus to one of such games, and she decides to sneak out of the house. Her sisters are also happy to get out, so they help her. Unfortunately, the girls miss the bus, but a kind truck driver I've mentioned before helps them catch up to it. That's how Lale gets to know him. The girls have the best time at the game, but they have no idea that it's being broadcasted. At home, their grandmother and aunt see them on TV. And to protect the girls, their aunt cuts power in the whole village. After the girls come back, this is when the grandmother decides that they should be married off, so she parades them in the center of the village for potential suitors. The girls are put on display like goods for sale. This is the only time when their sexuality is permitted. The Lisbon girls also have zero autonomy in picking their dates for the homecoming, except for Lux, who is going with Trip.
Who's taking who?
Whom?
They're just gonna raffle us off.
In the novel, one of the girls who attended the dance said, quote, "They hadn't even been asked. It was like an arranged marriage or something. Creepy." End quote. Mrs. Lisbon also makes dresses for her daughters to cover their whole bodies. Compared to the Mustang dresses, they are definitely better, but also described as identical shapeless sex. There is a big difference between how the cameras of two movies look at the sisters. Mustang presents the girls and their bodies as a matter of fact. They're natural, very playful and childlike, because this is how Lale sees her sisters. But actually not everybody saw it this way. When the movie was shown in Turkey, the reactions were very extreme and polarizing. Deniz Gamze Ergüven received various threats even though she avoided any discussions of religion in her movie. Many thought that since she spent majority of her life in France and not in Turkey, this was her Western perception of the country.
The nature of the debate is very close to the conflict inside the film. So there's people who say things like, it makes me sick to my stomach to see these girls so little dressed in front of the camera. And then people who answer on social media, like if you looked at them as if they were kids, maybe you wouldn't say things like that.
The Lisbon girls, on the other hand, are clouded by a warm romantic haze. I've never had my messy room look as aesthetically pleasing as theirs. We're looking at them through the boys' eyes. To them, every move is romantic and erotic. The Lisbon sisters are their dream girls. The movie adaptation of The Virgin Suicides, however, downplays the abuse Lisbon sisters are subjected to, and the fact that this romantic, maybe at first innocent gaze transforms into a full-blown sexualization and objectification of the girls. According to numerous witnesses, the sisters looked skinny and dirty. Nobody was delivering groceries to them. Their house looked dead. Their parents didn't want to buy them new clothes, so the scene where they all walk down the school hallway in their matching school uniforms looks very different in the book. Mrs. Lisbon never gave girls girls any beauty tips, she got rid of all the beauty magazines. This is the description of the hairdos they had for homecoming. Quote, "Their dating inexperience showed only in their pinned-up hair, which looked like stuffing coming out or exposed wiring." End quote. So the girls learn everything by themselves and are more awkward in real life, like Mary, who dances like an old person at the homecoming. I still like the movie for what it is, but it doesn't go all the way. All the creepy scenes from the book are removed. There is a boy who wanted to take Lux's bloody tampon as a trophy, another boy who wanted to grope Cecilia's dead body. The male narrators managed to get a photo of Lux's uterine walls that was taken at a hospital when she managed to fake a ruptured appendix and get out of the house to check if she was pregnant. Turned out she had HPV. Just the fact that the final quote misses a crucial piece of a puzzle where it says, quote, "They hadn't heard us calling, still do not hear us, up here in the treehouse, with our thinning hair and soft bellies, calling them out of those rooms where they went to be alone for all time." End quote. This line is haunting. The movie includes the interview with an older Trip Fontaine, who is a recovering substance abuser, but the main boys are never shown as men. Both movies comment on how the girls are seen by others as interchangeable. Their female body is a commodity. The grandma in Mustang keeps saying to the potential in-laws how special every sister is, and it becomes so laughable when the switch between Sanay and Selma happens.
Bir tane çok güzel. O da bir tanedir.
The in-laws don't even flinch. They just need a girl, doesn't matter which. The grandma in Mustang is actually a good representation of how women who grow up in extremely conservative communities end up perpetuating the same dangerous ideas. They see nothing wrong with their way of living because for them it's the norm. And even if they speak up, they usually don't have the means to fight the system. The grandmother also went through an arranged marriage when she was younger. She lost her sons and is now trying to take care of these 5 girls. The director explained that the grandmother is actually trying to save the sisters and get them out of that horrible house using the only method she knows. She is aware that her son is sexually abusing Ece and Nur.
Kalk. Kızları dışarı götür. Hadi kalk.
The Lisbon sisters are also always mixed up. They're not perceived as separate individuals. I think even by their own parents, especially the mother. I believe that's what they want the most in life, and that's why they pick such different ways to go. The most crucial moment that doesn't appear in the movie is the whole situation with Mary and the fact that she survives. First of all, a parents group donates a bench in the girl's memory to the school. Mary is still alive at this point, but the plaque doesn't acknowledge that fact. Just everybody around the girls keeps perceiving them as a single mythical martyr. And secondly, the collective male narrator, the group of boys who appear to be so enamored by the sisters, completely stop caring about Mary after she survives. They don't have any desire to save her anymore. They're like vultures just waiting for the inevitable. They of course couldn't do much as they were themselves kids. The whole community didn't care about these girls. But when you realize that these are adult men retelling you the story of their youth, the delusions are unmatched. The collective male narrator in the novel presents the Lisbon sisters' action as a tragic accident, their inability to receive help that was apparently offered to them. But when you put the story side by side with Mustang, it forces you to look at it differently. Similar to Edge's situation, it can be their way of reclaiming autonomy over their lives. I don't even know if what happens at the end is the truth and not a savior's wet dream, but if you assume that it is, it looks like the girls' plan involved getting revenge on the boys. They start writing them letters, signaling that they need their help. When the boys finally come to take the girls away on the fateful day, Lux flirts with them, feeding into their delusions. And then the girls completely abandon them. The way Tripp left Lux on that field, or the way Bonnie was left hanging after never receiving that promised call from her date. Like the girls knew how obsessed and stalkerish these silly boys were, so they decided to play their game. After rereading the novel, I do feel some sympathy for Mr. and Mrs. Lisbon. At its core, it's also a story about grief. It's clear that they don't know how to process the death of their child. And if the foundation of the family is depressed, the whole house is going to crumble. They don't know how to comfort girls and how to show affection, so they impose rules to show that they care. Did Mrs. Lisbon also try to save her daughters from the inevitable heartbreak the world was going to cause them? By not treating their daughters as their equals, the parents killed all the love in the family. For Deniz Gamze Ergüven, it was very important not to portray the girls as victims, but the figures of youth that can inspire others. It's how she wanted to be when she was younger but couldn't. It's your fantasy. That's why she picked this title. A Mustang is a horse without a master. It reflects the temper of the girls, their long beautiful hair, their energy, and their desire for freedom. I 100% look at the girls in both movies as victims. There is no other way. No girl should ever be put in a position where she doesn't have the right to decide what she does with her own body and life, when she thinks that the only way she can feel free is if she chooses death. It's very easy to look at these stories and say, well, why didn't the girls do more? They have each other, why not just run away? It's the old, why do women stay in abusive relationships questions. It can be extremely hard to find mental and emotional strength within yourself to push back against the structure, and it can be one person or a whole community that is actively trying to destroy your self-worth as a human. Jeffrey Eugenides was surprised that his novel that he considered very male became so popular among girls. He got the inspiration for the story after talking to a real teenage girl who revealed that she and her sisters tried to end their lives at a certain point. It taps into that feeling of not being heard and taken seriously as a teenager, and frankly as a grown woman sometimes. It's the realization that your young female body is inherently perceived as sexual. That is something many girls can understand because they can precisely pinpoint when their innocent, carefree childhood abruptly ended. But I still understand the message of Mustang. Both movies try to show girlhood as something special and intimate. Despite all the pain and hardships, there's still a lot of beauty in being a girl. It's the courage you have to be vulnerable and passionate and silly and expressive. It's other women and girls who you might meet only briefly but whose impact will stay with you forever. Through Lali's character, the director is highlighting how important it is for women and girls to have a support system that doesn't only involve their immediate family. How essential it is to know as many skills as possible and as early as possible, for example driving, so you don't have to rely on anybody else in a dire situation. When I was growing up, I was mourning the fact that I wasn't a boy for some time. I rejected everything that was feminine, the color pink for God's sake. But now I see more and more girls on social media embracing almost every aspect that comes with being a girl or being feminine. They give younger girls tips and advice on hygiene and school, and I think it helps you not to feel like an alien. I personally didn't have that. Talking about all of these things was kind of shameful. It changes everything when you hear the stories from other girls and women, and I'm glad we're seeing more and more of them in cinema.